Hey guys, just decided to go for a walk because it's finally starting to get decent out here. I'm going with my little buddy, Bingley. There he goes again. He's got to sniff everything and pee on everything. I just wanted to talk to you guys about a book I'm reading. I think it's relevant to the discussion, especially in terms of, class warfare and labor versus capitalism, these kinds of things. The book I'm talking about is a collection of talks and essays by Theodore Roosevelt called The Strenuous Life. It's a Dover thrift classic. I'll put a link to it maybe on Amazon or something here in the notes. It was like $3. It was super, super cheap. And it was super good. So why is this relevant? Well, I think the discussion that we have today, there's a conservative group that thinks that people don't take enough individual responsibility, they're not working hard enough, they're moochers, they want something for nothing, blah, 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 blah. I think you all understand that. The other side says corporate interests have gone way too far, they put profits over people, they have way too much power, they've got, unlimited power to affect government, and get in the way of our political processes and undermine democracy, all of these kinds of things. What's interesting about this is that this discussion is, about 100 years old or more. That as soon as the United States entered the industrial era and we got all of these very large powers, come on, dude, look at this guy. He's got to sniff everything. Pee on everything. Look at this. Look how awesome this is. A week ago, this entire bay, this entire river was just one big ice flow. Okay, so what was I saying? This discussion about labor versus corporate interest was over 100 years old. And it was really taking place big time during the Industrial Revolution. And the height of it was in the early 1900s and late 1800s. That's exactly when Teddy Roosevelt became president of the United States. And something that was really fascinating about his talks and The Strenuous Life and about the essays that he wrote is that he emphasized very heavily individual responsibility. That people should be responsible for their own lives, people should work hard. He never said anything different. I would challenge anybody to go find him making an argument about anything but people taking responsibility for their own lives. At the same time, Teddy Roosevelt also believed in the power of government and collective activity. And he makes it very clear in a lot of different addresses that he gives, especially in the Chicago Labor Day address of 1901. Sorry, this dog is being an idiot. Come on. Dogs. Anyway, in the Chicago Labor Day address of 1901, he says something very interesting, which is that there is a balance, a balance that needs to be held by small, reasonable steps to ensure that corporate power is checked by government, which is, he says that corporations are creatures of government, and then that people themselves still take responsibility. Well, we're still in this dilemma now, and what really fascinated me about this, and the point that I want to make in this video, is that this is not an either-or, that we are led, I think, by the media to believe that this is a discussion that has only two viewpoints, that there's not somehow some middle ground, because keeping the discussion going, not solving it, keeping ideologies polarized against each other, causes people to watch television programs like MSNBC and Fox News, and keeps people in power because they are ideologues of one side or the other. What makes more sense is to find a reasonable middle ground between the two, but there's no value, there's no political power that can be had in that position, that people who are reasonable people don't get the passions burning in their constituencies enough to get elected, and there's no money to be made by exploiting that constituency's anger into watching your television show and looking at advertising. So I don't really know if there's a silver bullet solution to this issue. Climate change is happening. That's a scientifically verifiable fact. We also have scientifically verifiable evidence that social inequality leads to problems for everyone, not just poor people. And yet all of these things are taking place, probably because the polarizing influence of media is preventing any real discussion from happening. I think I would suggest that, just like Teddy Roosevelt said, there's an individual responsibility for taking on the burdens of problems, of challenges, and a collective responsibility of mutual interest between people who share common beliefs. It's probably going to be a combination of the two. That these days, it is true. I think conservatives are right that a lot of people abdicate individual responsibility. I've talked about this before, but also that a lot of left-wing progressives are correct as well, and that individuals are not being properly supported by a system. They're really being exploited by it a lot of the time as well. One thing that's nice about the winter is that it does always eventually end, no matter how crappy it is for a while. And I want to relate that to this discussion only because these issues, ones that are facing us today, things like climate change, social inequality, the rise of unchecked corporate power, even individual responsibility being abdicated, these kinds of things, that stuff, that's going to end one way or another. And I think we can either approach that problem or those problems reasonably as challenges that we can solve using some of the best reasonable, measured knowledge that we have in the way that Teddy Roosevelt described, or we can leave it to ideologues on television to stoke the fires of our passions until nothing really can get done. I mean, that's why in the ancient world, passion, which is a word that we use today in such a good way, was actually seen as a bad thing. That people who had passions were gripped by them, and they no longer could listen to reason. And this is why we have things like crimes of passion and terms like that. You never hear of a crime of reason. Just something to think about. I don't know what the solution is. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Meanwhile, the madness continues.